Did you know that when you're nursing, you might have a good boob and sometimes an even better boob? It's a common experience many moms face. And in today's episode, we're diving into the world of feeding your baby with expert Courtney Miller and IBCLC from the Better Boob. Whether you're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, pumping, or using formula, we're going to cover it all, answering all your burning questions and helping you understand the science behind feeding. Plus, we're going to share the red flags to watch for so you know when it's time to reach out for support. Our goal is to make feeding your baby an enjoyable and sustainable part of your parenting journey, no matter what that looks like for your family. So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea or drink and settle in as we explore making feeding time more stress free for you and your little one. In our most sleep deprived moments, our children will teach us exactly what we need in order to learn and grow into who we were created to be. These are the loving lessons we will learn whether we were wanting to or not. I'm Irene Googe, your sleep coach, and I'm on mission to educate parents on how to help their young children sleep. Welcome to the journey. Hello, and welcome to the Loving Lessons Learned podcast. I am so excited to have Courtney Miller, who is the name and face behind the Better Boob. She is an international board certified lactation consultant and has been a registered nurse since 2016. She's currently working as a private lactation consulting, offering in-home consults in the Raleigh area, as well as virtual consults. And I love having you here, Courtney, because I tell families all the time, like, yes, you do have a better boob.
Yes.
Welcome. Thanks
Yeah,
for being here.
thanks for having me on. Yes, it's so funny. My business name, most people understand the good boob and better boob, but I had
Yes.
a client reach out and she was like, I thought it was, oh, that makes so much, I was saying the difference between one side
Yes.
versus the other. And she was like, why does one side make more? And I was like, oh, that's just your better boob, like wink, wink. And she was like, oh, I thought it was because you make my boobs better. And I was like, well, two, so we'll take it. It's a 2 for 1. I like it.
I love it. That's a great way to look at that.
Yeah.
So, Courtney, have you always wanted to get into lactation and breastfeeding and all that?
Yeah.
How did you land into this work?
Yeah. So I started out as a nurse. I think I always, everyone always is like, I never expected myself to be here. And I don't think I quite realized it would be lactation, but I knew it would be something with babies.
Uh-huh.
Growing up, I always wanted to work with babies or kids. I wanted to be a pediatrician or, then it kind of shifted to I want to be the nurse because I know the nurse does a lot of the doctors are important, but nurses do a lot of the background stuff that no one understands. So I went into nursing school and thought then, oh, labor and delivery was always kind of on my mind. And then I actually started out as a critical care ICU nurse. So I worked with adults and I did it for about 2 years. It was not where I wanted to be. It was where it was offered to me as a job. And I was like, I'm going to take a job. And so then after some career changes within that, I stayed there for about 2 years and then I moved to labor and delivery mother baby. And that's where I really found my happy place. And then just working with moms that were breastfeeding, even though at that time I had never breastfed a baby, I hadn't had my kiddos yet. And so from there, once I finally had my kiddos, when I had my first struggling so much with him, we went through all low milk supply and we had a tongue tie that wasn't really diagnosed. And then that caused him to not gain his weight as well as the pediatrician would have liked, which then brought a lot of blame onto me. You're not doing enough. You don't have enough milk. It's dairy. It's you're this, you're that. And it was never addressed what the real problem was. And so because I struggled so much, I literally looked at my husband like, I don't want anybody else to struggle the way that I have. And I want to be I just felt like I wasn't getting any answers. So then I had to find those answers. And so one day I was like, I think I'm going to go get my IBCLC. And my husband was like, okay. He didn't really know what IBCLC
He was like, I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what that was. What's that going to do for you in the long run? I mean,
Yeah.
he's a businessman. He works as a business consultant. So, I mean, he was thinking, so where's this going? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm going to do it because I just feel this calling I don't want moms to be in the same place that I was. And so that was back in 2019. And so here I am.
And here you are.
So proceeded with my IBCLC. I worked in the hospital as an IBCLC, a lactation consultant, just on like a postpartum floor for about a year. And then 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, we moved to Raleigh, the Raleigh area, and I just jumped right in with full private practice. And I think it's just so special being in such a vulnerable part. I'm sure you feel this way too, like a very vulnerable part of mom's parents' lives. And so I just like that I'm able to like go, I do office visits and home visits, but those home visits are still so special because you're
Yeah.
just in there in like the trenches. So it's just I'm living literally my dream job. I love what I do every day. I love going and helping parents. So it's been a blessing to me as much as I feel like, people are like, oh my gosh, you saved me. And I'm like, but it's so rewarding for me too. So
Yeah. No, I love and I can feel the passion you have for
I love
parents. And it is one of those things like as a postpartum doula and a sleep coach, being able to be in home with a family is so special and unique to be able
it.
to see actually like what's actually happening in their environment.
Mhm,
And I think that that oftentimes can give us a lot of good clues and indicators as to like what might be really happening
mhm,
with feeding. And, Courtney, why I'm super excited about this conversation is as a sleep coach, a lot of times people are coming to me about sleep, and I'm like, but we need to talk about feeding
mhm,
because a lot of times that is actually a really big missing piece. And that's actually why I became a postpartum doula.
mhm.
And one of the things I share with families is that it takes 6 to 8 weeks for feeding to get established. Would you verify, like, is that true in terms of like breastfeeding and even bottle feeding? Can you talk a little bit about that so parents can understand
Yeah,
why that might be important?
yeah, it can be. I mean, I think definitely the first couple of weeks, especially with breastfeeding, it is a lot. I mean, your baby is learning and you are learning. As natural as breastfeeding feels, or seems, as
Seems, I was going to say, I'm like, when I
not
was going
feel
through my journey, nothing
as
seemed
yeah,
natural.
as much as it seems, like, on the outside looking in,
Yeah.
you're like, when you're preparing to have a baby, you're just like, "Oh, yeah, like, I'll just breastfeed it. It'll be what it is." And it is very much a skill, and I feel like it's not as natural. It doesn't feel as natural as it should
Mm.
be. Like, just, like, setting your baby up and latching your baby can be, it's kind of like I relate it to, like, rubbing your belly and patting your head. It's like you're doing so many different things and then you're trying to latch this baby and like you're learning this skill and then your baby is also learning the skill. So then
Mhm.
and then on top of that you're sleep deprived and like you just went through a major life event. And so when we're trying to do all of that in that first day, that first week, those first couple of weeks, it does feel like it can take a while to get established. Um I would say yes and no to your question. I do think that it does take some time, and some it does just come very. Some babies do just go on and latch, and it is this, rainbows and butterflies. But then I also say there's a lactation consultants for a reason, and there's a reason I have a job is because most of the time it's not like that. So, and I think there can be different problems that arise later on as your baby changes. So like you might be getting in the hang of it and like some things get easier, but then like another little like developmental thing happens. Like I just had a 4 month old, 3-ish 4 month old, and they're more distracted. So they're looking around. And so like you add that, like it got easier, but then like a new thing kind of came about. So I think, yes, to answer your question, I do think that once you kind of get into your rhythm, um, things do get easier around that 6 to 8. But then, like, there can also be other things that happen, and that's okay because your baby's constantly changing. So we kind of have to like ride the wave with them.
Yeah.
And I think the same can go for bottle feeding too. I mean, especially whether you're formula feeding or pumping and bottle feeding, there's different things you have to navigate. You've got a baby that's wanting to move while you're trying to pump. So, like, that's, um, and then it comes with, oh, well, how much should I be feeding my baby and stuff like that? And that, those questions can come about and changes can happen with that.
What tips do you share with moms who are nursing and are trying to figure out, am I feeding my baby enough?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing that we look at, the most, basic level thing that I like to say is what goes in must come back out. So, looking at peas and poos, the general contentness of your baby is a big sign too. Yes, I want babies to sleep, but I don't want them to sleep too much sometimes because sometimes our little tiny babies that were just born, they choose to sleep and not eat. So, like, sleep is not always in those couple of weeks. I'm like, let's reevaluate. And then the most obvious is going to be that, going and getting weight checks, that your baby is growing. That's obviously what we want to look at. So, and then if you're feeding from the breast, if you're feeling softer after feedings, that's usually a general good sign. But then that comes with, again, bringing back to things change over time as your milk supply starts regulating, which is about anywhere from 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, you may not feel as full. So then it comes back to, well, am I feeding my baby enough? So those are the kind of things that I do feel like even if you didn't need a lactation consultant early on, if things were really well, don't hesitate to reach out if you see those things kind of come up just for confirmation of, okay, I do plenty of consults like that where they're just like, I think everything's going good, but I just want to make sure. And so what we do usually in a lactation consult is meet with you and we bring a scale and we can do a weighted feeding. And so that gives those visual, we are as humans, we want to see things, we want to see progress. It's hard to know how much you're feeding your baby from your breast because you can't see how much they're
Right.
taking.
Mhm.
So a weighted feed can be very helpful, even if it's just like a little check-in, like, okay, we're doing good. Baby's taking what baby needs, that sort of thing. It can just take that layer of stress off.
Yeah, I love that you talk about how it changes over time because, I actually do share with families like that. Babies will sleep if they're feeding well, but if they're, especially in that early newborn season, like we really want to make sure that feeding is going
Yeah.
well because it's not normal for babies to sleep well. So I do want to share that with people
Yeah.
because I think biologically understanding that is really important.
Yeah.
I think
And there's
that
only Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I just think that it's too early for babies to even think about developing that skill because it does develop over time and it has so much to do with the rhythms and habits we create.
Yeah.
And like thinking about how we're showing up, and being calm and relaxed to
Mhm.
help our little ones, which also then helps with feeding.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I think again, if we're feeling stressed, that's gonna you know, cause
Oh,
issues and I think to your point too, I love how you're talking about like over time, you might need a lactation consultant because I hear from parents often, even if I'm working with a family that's 6 months or like 9 months of age, I'm like, I would kind of check in and see. And I'm wondering, like, does the milk supply shift if families are trying to get longer stretches of sleep or if they're also introducing more solids?
yeah.
I'm wondering if you can kind of speak a little bit to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I think, sleep and breastfeeding I was just at a conference this past weekend and, sleep it's a very loaded thing with breastfeeding because and I think I mean, I'm sure you probably feel this way too. I think so much of it is temperament. There is like so much to do with temperament. And there's no like right or wrong, and we have to figure out what works for your baby. But yes, I mean, I definitely think, you know, that it can impact your breast milk supply because you do make the most of your milk between about the hours of 1 and 5 a.m. So like that's when your prolactin is increasing, and prolactin is what is making the milk. And when that is increasing, then you have more of an abundant supply in those wee hours of the night. And your baby knows that. Your baby kind of feeds off of that. And so in those, especially really early months, those night feedings can be very biologically normal for baby and needed for mom's milk supply. Now, are there caveats to all of this? Yes. Are there moms that can go longer stretches and it not impact their milk supply? Absolutely. And I wish I had the crystal ball to be able to tell people because they're like, is it okay? And I'm like, I don't know. We have to kind of see if it
Right.
works for your body and for your baby. Um, So, as your milk composition is constantly changing, your milk supply is regulating to what baby needs. And so, ideally, yes, if baby is doing longer stretches at night, they're going to make up for that during the day. Um, and sometimes a mom's milk supply can handle that, and sometimes they need those night removals to keep up their milk. So there's definitely no like black or white with that. There is a lot of gray. And again, that goes back to like, I'm like, I just want my crystal ball to be able to be like, yes, you don't need them, or no, you do need them. Um, and so to answer your question, as time goes on, I mean, with breast milk, because it's constantly changing, when your breast milk kind of your body acts on like a calendar based on, or a time clock based on when the placenta is removed. And when that placenta is removed, from like after you have your baby and that placenta is removed, that starts the cascade of hormones to make milk. And your body knows that based on when that placenta came out. And based on that, your milk composition is constantly going to change to meet the needs of your baby. That is why generally babies that are getting breast milk, they kind of tap out between 3 and 4 ounces of breast milk per feeding every about 2 to 3 hours. Now, again, there's caveats to that. There's different things that can come, but generally speaking, it's about 3 to 4 ounces up until they're, not taking breast milk anymore, being 1 year or older. So 3 to 4 ounces, which is very
That is
different.
that is really important to think about. I'm going to just say, like, because oftentimes I have a baby bottle here and we're trying to fill it up. What do you say to the mamas that are trying to pump and
Yep,
they're not feeling
yep,
like they're getting
yep.
enough?
And I mean, it's so hard with social media nowadays, and you see all these moms on TikTok, and they're
Mhm.
making 10 ounces of breast milk, and they're like,
Yes.
how am I ever going to make 10 ounces of breast milk? And I'm like, they're
Mm.
the caveats. They're the ones that I'm talking about. Um,
Right.
there is a thing called breast milk storage capacity. How much can my breast, your breast, can our breast hold until it signals to the brain to slow down milk supply? So there is a trigger in the brain. It's called the FIL, feedback inhibitor of lactation. That it's a feedback loop. And so when the breasts are more full, it signals to the brain, hey, there is no more room down here. Please don't send any more milk. We don't like, our hotel is full. We cannot take any more. We do not have any vacancy. Don't send any more. But when the breasts are more, if they're emptied, that feedback goes on up and says, yep, we've got room now, send it down, and to send the hormones, I mean, to make the milk. And so more milk removal, more milk made in theory. There, of course, are caveats to that as well. But more milk, removed is more milk made. And so we talk about the storage capacity. I might have a storage capacity that I can only store 4 ounces, 3 ounces before my body turns it off and says, nope, you can't have any more. I may have a really good friend that can store 10 ounces, and her level, she can store 10 ounces before the brain says, nope, you can't make any more. And so that's the difference between storage capacity. It is no relation to how big your breasts are. Literally just had a client that has been not as blessed with big breasts. And she's like, how can I store this much? And I'm like, I don't know, girl. Everybody's got their, our bodies are amazing. And same on the other end, like it does not matter. Your breast, the outside appearance of them does not mean you're going to have a bigger capacity or a smaller capacity. It really is just how much mammary glands that you have within your breast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And I love that you're normalizing that because again, sometimes it's so confusing with all of the social media stuff. And I
Mhm.
do feel like sometimes coming in as a postpartum doula or sleep coach and I'm talking about this, they're like, why are you
Yeah.
talking about this? And I'm like, it really is so independent to that mother-child dyad that they have
Mhm.
going on and figuring out their natural rhythm and
Yeah.
routine that they have established. And that's really the right one. But like, that's hard for us to accept, I think,
Yeah.
in this day and age.
And it's so hard too with formula. Formula is life-saving. Formula, we need formula, but formula is a different composition than breast milk is. I mean, it's just there's a difference there.
Mhm.
There's no way about it, but the composition of formula is going to be very different than breast milk. Your breast milk, again, based on that time clock, is constantly changing to meet the needs of your growing baby. Whereas formula, it's this constant substance, and it pretty much has the same amount of calories, the same amount of protein, carbohydrates, everything. Like it has the same, and we have to add more to it typically to make the needs of, say, your 8-month old. We have to increase that a little bit to meet that, whereas your breast milk is constantly changing. The other part of it is based on your bottle. We've got these 8-ounce bottles, and moms think, oh, I have to fill that whole thing. But for a formula fed baby may get 6, 7, 8 ounces of formula, but then they're usually stretching out their feedings a little bit more so they can go a little bit longer. Whereas breast milk, the composition is just different. They're only going to take that 3 to 4 ounces because they know they're going to eat more easily digested. Breast milk is. And so they're going to want to eat more frequently just based on that alone. It's just a different composition. So it's like, it's apples and oranges. They're both good, but they are different. And so it's hard to, because we do want them to be the same because they are ways to feed our babies. So we don't want to make that divide, but we do have to understand that their composition is just made up different. I can have an apple and I can have an orange. They're both healthy for me, but they're just different.
So, what you mentioned earlier about tongue tie, what are some of the
Mm-hmm.
things that come up for parents that could cause challenges in the breastfeeding journey? And then, like, how would a parent know and understand tongue tie,
Yep.
especially too, because I think that can be another piece that can be,
Mhm.
oftentimes shared, like, oh, your baby's tongue tie, you got to revise it. And
Oh yeah.
um, so just kind of trying to navigate that for parents as they're trying to figure out what do I do if I'm having some of these challenges with latching and
Yeah.
nursing.
First and foremost, I would say get with a lactation consultant, get with an IBCLC that can help with, is this a tongue tie or is this something else that we can do other things for? I never want to jump straight towards, tongue ties do have a bad rep in the community right now. I mean, just all over, there are different articles coming out. The AAP has said some things. And so it makes parents question, well, is this a thing or is this not? Should I do something about it or should I not? And I think working with a lactation consultant that does have experience with tongue ties, to know, is this a time where we need to intervene or is everything going okay? My whole thing is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If it is not affecting things, even if we can see one, or it might just be the level of severity of your symptoms. Baby might have some symptoms, mom might have some symptoms, but is it sustainable for their feeding journey? And if it is, we don't mess with it. Like, we're not going to mess with something that's not broken. But there are other times, and I feel like most of the time, a lot of those symptoms are normalized. Like, oh, well, you just have pain with breastfeeding, you just should, it's fine. You can the cracking, bleeding, it's normal. Your nipples just have to get used to it. A very cranky, gassy, colicky, a very upset baby, a baby that's spitting up a lot, a baby that is just uncomfortable. Oh, they'll just get through that. They just have colic. They'll be okay. And it's like, well, if it's affecting mom or if it's affecting baby and it's not sustainable for their feeding journey, or they need to, some of the times, I mean, I worked with a client just today that was like, well, just bottle feed and just see if the symptoms change. And it's like, but if that's not the mom's feeding goals, if it is, so be it. But if it's not the mom's feeding goals, then that's not fair. Because as you said, with, talking about the dyad, it's a mom and a baby in this feeding relationship. So if something is going awry in one of them, if one of them is fine and one of them is not, that's 50% of our equation here. Like,
Right?
that's huge. So sometimes it's like, well, baby's gaining weight, but mom is in a lot of pain. Mom, you are so important in this journey. We could not
Yes.
do this without you. So that's where I bring in a lot of, like, is it sustainable? Is the
Mhm.
symptoms that you're having, are they sustainable and are they working? Are you going to be returning to work? So you're going to be pumping and that bottle feeding is going to be majority of your thing and you don't want to move forward with anything. That's fine too. Like, that is good where it's individually based. So, yes, can tongue ties affect things? They absolutely can, but there are other ways. Like, if you are very nervous about any sort of procedure, which I totally understand. These are our babies and we want to make sure that we're doing the very best for them. There are other things. Okay, let's try this first. I never send someone straight to anything because there is a level of like preparation that we need to do for the baby and to prepare the parents. And like, it's not a one stop, just let's clip that and be done. It's usually not that simple. It is usually a lot of work, and working with someone that is very familiar with the baby's mouth and oral function and different exercises and body movement. There's lots of different things that we can try. So I try, that's kind of my like, I compete
Have a
against myself.
team.
Yes, it's definitely a team, and I compete against myself. Like, can I fix this without going forward with anything like a procedure? Let me, like, that's my challenge to myself. And if we have to do it, then we have to do it.
Right.
But I'm always like, let's try this. Let's try these other things first.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just as simple of like positioning. Like, baby's just not able to get a deep latch because baby is not turned into the breast. Baby doesn't have a good, let's work on that latching, that positioning. Sometimes it's just a little bit of tension. Okay, let's do some floor time with baby. I'll show you some movements that we can do with baby. So there's so many different ways that we can go, that I think tongue ties have gotten a bad rep because there are some providers that may just jump into it.
Sure.
But it really is a team approach. I mean, anytime I refer to anybody, it is like they have also referred people to me that they're like, I don't want to do this because I want you to see lactation first. And that I think means a lot. That says a lot for that provider to be like, I don't want to do this because there's stuff before me and there's stuff after me, and I'm only one part of it. So we
Yeah.
use a very collaborative approach for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's important to think about too. Like if you have a provider that might not be open to having discussions, like I think that sometimes I encourage parents to just recognize like you always have the opportunity to have a second or third opinion.
Oh, yes.
And you were talking too about thinking about how you make changes. I'm wondering, when do you recommend to parents to start eliminating things from their diet? Because that's a big one too
Yeah,
that comes up.
it is.
And I hear moms all the time. They're like, I stopped eating this and I'm not doing this. And then like that 50%, like it makes me wonder,
Yeah.
is it necessary? And how do we figure that out? Because if you go on Dr. Google, who has no children,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm like, no children there. Like, how do we figure that out as we're
Yeah.
navigating that journey?
Yeah, that is definitely, if I have a baby that's dealing with gas or anything like that, one of the first things that someone asks me, is it the broccoli I ate? Is it the spicy thing that I ate? So just to kind of, yes, are there times that there is a diet causing an infant symptoms? Yes, absolutely. But majority of the time with your baby is the spicy things, is the broccoli, is the things that gave you gas making your baby gassy? Likely not. The reason for that is very simple, of just an anatomy. When I eat broccoli, eggs, whatever, those gassy beans, when I eat those, that gas is going to stay in my gut. That gas is not going to go through my blood to then make my breast milk, because my breast milk is made by my blood. And those gases are not going to travel through our bloodstream to our breast milk to baby to give them gas. Now, are there times where there are dairy intolerances, soy, egg? Are there times where a baby has trouble with different proteins? And that's the biggest thing there, is proteins. The baby is having trouble with those really, really big proteins of dairy. Those very much mimic tongue tie symptoms. So when we have a latching problem, if there is a tongue tie or any sort of oral dysfunction, there is usually air intake. So the tongue is not working as it should. It should work in a wave-like motion. And if it's kind of doing this kind of back and forth, if it's kind of just like going on and off the breast or the bottle, and you're hearing clicking, that's air. So if you hear, that's that tongue coming off of the nipple.
Mm.
of the breast or the bottle, and that is air potentially being swallowed. That air is then leading to that gas and that potentially spit up, because we have all these air bubbles every time we're swallowing air. It's kind of like if you drink a carbonated beverage really quickly, you're going to get those air bubbles and you're like, you got to burp, you got to bring them up. So when we have that, that can very much mimic, is that a latching problem or is that a food related problem? Where we have the difference there is food related problems are going to be like a rash all over their body, or especially their face. So a rash, like an allergic reaction type rash, or eczema. If your baby has eczema, like, we've got baby acne, but then we might have like it's persisted and it just keeps on keeping on. Spit up is where the spit up is going to be in the middle. Okay. So the spit up, because of that air, it could be air trapped and then causing spit up. They swallow the air goes down into their belly, and then the belly can't hold it all. So it spits it back up. So the air
Courtney,
is,
can I ask a question around that
yeah,
though?
yeah.
So, but we know that digestion is very underdeveloped in newborns, right? Like, because I've heard that it takes until almost 6 months of age.
Mhm,
So, how
mhm.
much of that also impacts some of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it definitely does. I think you're ruling out, is there a latching problem? Do we have clicking that's happening where we can
Mm.
hear the air swallowing? And that goes in when any client that I work with, any baby, I do a functional oral exam on them. So I am having them suck on my finger, and then I am pulling down their jaw to see what their tongue is doing. So is their tongue able to wrap around my finger and have a good hold on my finger, or is it popping on and off, leading to that air? So very, very good question. Yes, there is a little bit like, some gas, like, is normal. But if I'm having a baby, looking at symptoms, if I'm having a baby that's arching their back all the time and they're just like uncomfortable, it's really looking at the whole picture. There's definitely not like one, this, if you answer yes to this, it automatically means
Right.
that there's, um, yes, there can be a little bit of that, but we're also looking at the whole picture. Is mom having pain? Is mom having cracking, bleeding, blistering? Are we having really long feedings? Meaning, the tongue is the motor to the mouth, so the tongue should be able to remove the milk efficiently, in theory, and efficiently meaning 15 to 20 minutes. Generally speaking, do we have a lot of feedings that are 45 minutes to an hour long? Are all of our feeding, is this baby just living at the breast? So there's so many things like, okay, if the baby also is having gas, but then is having really long feedings and mom is in a lot of pain, let's dive deeper into that. What's going on with that picture? So the GI upset is definitely something that it can be, like you said, it can be developmentally. It can be also, tongue tie related. It could be food allergy related. So that's where that one is the one in the middle that confuses a lot of people. And we have to kind of like look at the other symptoms. And then, so we've got, in allergy land, I call it, in allergy land, we've got the rash, and then we've got like blood or mucus in the stool. Those two things are not going to be latch related. Those two things are generally going to be, okay, it's something in the food, because we have
Got it.
GI, like we have skin, which is the biggest organ in our body. So we are having a skin reaction, or if we're having blood in the stool, that is like, that's not related to tongue tie. That is the blood in the stool, or like mucus in the stool, means that there is irritation within the gut, and that is showing in the stool. So if I have those two things, fun fact, if your pediatrician tests your baby's stool and they say, oh, yep, it was positive for dairy and soy, that's not true. It's just testing that there's a presence of inflammation. That's all it's testing. So it
That's
might
so good.
be dairy or soy, but it also might be egg or wheat or literally anything else.
Any of those proteins that you were talking about.
Yep. Now it could be, most of the time it is dairy or soy. Dairy or soy have very, very similar proteins. Their protein makeup is very similar. They're very big proteins. And so it's very hard for the baby to pass those. And that is that intolerance, that it's just really big. So all of this to say, because I know we probably have more questions. With anything allergies, my biggest resource is Free to Feed. If you want to put this in the show notes,
I
Free to
will.
Feed, free, FREE, to feed.com. She's actually local to our area. She's in Durham. Her name is Dr. Trill. And she has literally devoted her life to studying breast milk and allergies. So these things that I'm talking about, these intolerances, these proteins that I'm talking about, I have learned so much from her. My second actually had an egg intolerance. And so I had to go through it. I went through dairy and because he had a skin rash. And so I had to go through this whole elimination diet, but then also there's another end to it. There is, once you've done the elimination diet, also fun fact, dairy is out of your system within about 4 to 6 hours, not
Oh,
4 to 6 weeks, which is what
that's
we.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. It is out of your system, out of your blood, and your milk pretty quickly. It is why is the reason that it takes that it's they say, oh, I have to hold, I can't feed my baby milk for 4 to 6 weeks. Like my breast milk, it's still in my breast milk. That is because the effects of the protein on the system are like take time to recover. If that gut has inflammation, if that gut had like a scrape on the inside of the gut, that has to heal. Our skin, biggest organ, has to heal. So it's going to take time for that to heal. That's not going to just happen overnight, even when we removed the trigger. But we have to repair that. And so that's what takes so long. It's out of your breast milk very, very quickly. So allergies and breastfeeding is something that's very, I mean, it comes up a lot because a lot of moms think I have to. I mean, even there are some cultures that say you have to eliminate
Right.
these certain foods or this or that. And all of it to say, more than likely not. There definitely are cases, but I would definitely recommend don't go to Dr. Google, go to Dr. Trill's website, and she has lactation consultants that also meet virtually with parents to navigate that. Is this a feeding issue or is this a food issue? So they kind of can decipher between what is really happening.
No, so helpful, Courtney. I appreciate you diving deep into some of
Yeah.
that because I think, again, sometimes we don't know and understand that. And when I'm in my role, like I need to stay in my lane and I see these signs and symptoms, and then I'm like, I just think you need to connect with a lactation consultant who's
Yeah.
more versed in this.
Yeah.
I think that would be my encouragement to those who are listening or watching to really recognize, like, noticing where you're at in this relationship and is it
Hmm.
sustainable? And if you're noticing some of those symptoms, like it could be worthwhile to get a second opinion
Absolutely.
because I think oftentimes we suffer through it and it makes it
Hmm.
miserable for
Hmm.
us and for our
Hmm.
kiddos. And
Hmm.
then we have the war stories that, we
Yeah.
tell. It's just not always necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of my job is doing detective work. I mean, when I started this, I thought, oh, is this going to be, I worked in the ICU. Is this going to be enough for me? Like, I mean, the thought crossed my mind. Like, is my mind going to be, my passion is fulfilled, but like, is my brain? And I think it's just as much because it's constantly figuring out like, and doing the detective work and finding the root cause. So it's still like diving, okay, it's not this. So like, I mean, we have to figure out what it is not to figure out what it is. And so I do a lot of detective work to figure out, and there's so many different things because I'm in a unique position that I'm in, you are too, I'm treating the mom and the baby. I'm not just treating one. So when you go to your pediatrician, they're looking at baby. When you go to your OB, they're mainly looking at you.
Right.
And there is a huge connection between the two of you that we do have to figure out. Like sometimes it's both, that we have to bring together. Like in the allergies, in intolerances and allergies to things, it's like, well, it's mom, but then it's also affecting baby. So we have to figure out.
What's really going on? What's taking
Yeah.
place?
So it's a lot of detective work. I say like lactation consultants I mean, they should be doing the detective work. And we have
Sure.
such a unique area that we work in that we're looking at both people from very different ages. We're looking at a baby to a mom. And we have to, there's a lot of detective work there.
Courtney, I have to ask this question because it's always hard for my families that are dealing with formula feeding
Mhm,
and
mhm,
bottle feeding
mhm,
only.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so then sometimes they feel stuck because they might be having some of the same issues or
Oh, yes.
symptoms and things like that.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering, like, what do you recommend, or how do you help them navigate some of the feeding issues that could be coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is something that we're struggling with as like a healthcare system. Technically for insurances, like the diagnosis that I use is like taking care of a lactating woman, which I don't think is fair because I do think that I very much help moms with pumping and bottle feeding. And so bottle feeding and like assessing the baby is a huge part of what I do. And so what I would say is sometimes there's some loopholes that, if you've recently finished breastfeeding, we can still kind of count it as like, okay, let's answer some weaning questions and we can kind of like dive deeper for like insurance purposes. But what I would say with that is we are still available to you. It's just trickier to get it covered with insurance, which is such a problem. And that is like, we're still, there's so much fight in just getting lactation coverage. And then on top of that, it's like, well, why can't I see a bottle feeding, formula feeding parent that is still having all of these issues that like no one else can really help them? Their pediatrician may not be helping them in that way. SLPs can be another one that could be covered by insurance. So if you are having those issues to get it covered by insurance, SLPs could be a really good option. We're just stuck in the way that we work as a lactation consultant. It's all insurance, but we always do self-pay. And I always try to like work out if money is an issue, work out with the specific client. Okay. Like, can we do a virtual, or can I work, how can I fit this in to where we do maybe a condensed consult? Like I've totally done that for parents that we can't get it covered by insurance, but if money is still a factor, we can still see you just privately. It's just insurance is such a game, and it's so sad that
Yeah.
it has to be like that. Like
Yeah.
I work with a company that bills for me, and I was like, can I see them? And they're like, no, they have to be lactating. And I'm like, this is so frustrating.
It is so frustrating. Yeah, because I'm always like, where do they go get help with like the formula stuff? And I know the pediatricians help, but I also think that that gets tricky too in our healthcare system. So,
It's just, yeah, it's like I
so
wish
many
I could
things.
take away all of that. Like I'm like, I wish I could just take away all of that and like it could just be like a feeding consult. Like I would be fine even if I wasn't a lactation consultant, like I would be fine doing all of it under one umbrella, but it's,
Right.
and maybe we'll get there eventually. I hope that we do. I mean, I definitely try, I have it on my Instagram. I always try to connect with like, you don't have to be breastfeeding. Like, I try to share information that's also valuable for just parents or bottle feeding or like however that you feed your baby. Whether that's breast milk, formula, donor milk, a mix of all of them, tube feedings. Like I really try to be inclusive of all of that because I know it's already a stressful time. We don't need to make it more stressful.
Yeah. I highly recommend you subscribe or follow Courtney,
Thank
the Better
you.
Boob, online, because she has so many great tips, so many helpful things to help navigate the journey. And
Yeah.
she has so much educational content, which is really awesome.
Thank you.
Courtney, before we scoot off, because I think we
Yeah.
could talk all day and I have
I'm
so
sure
many
we
more
could.
questions. So I may have to have you come back so we
No,
can
I'd
keep
love that.
talking about some things. Do you have some resources you can share with my audience
Yeah.
that maybe they can, look things up, figure out that I could add in the show notes?
Absolutely, absolutely. For breastfeeding, I highly recommend Kelly Mom. She is a good Kelly Kelly mom.com. She's an IBCLC and that is my Google for breastfeeding. Like that
Yes,
is
that's
like
mine too.
I
That's mine too.
literally just type in Kelly mom and then type in like mastitis or whatever the thing that I want to find. She has a lot of just easy information. And then there is, oh, I can't think of her name. I'll share it with you. There is also a Formula One that I recommend a lot to people. And I'm blanking on the name. The
You,
Formula Expert, I think it is.
if you find it, let me know. Do you have helpful items that you recommend for moms with
Yes.
pumping?
Yes. The babyformulaexpert.com.
Oh, baby formula.
Babyformulaexpert.com. She has a lot of good information. I even took like one of her courses just on like the different types of formula. And like when, when substitutions, like if you can't find your formula, like what can you substitute that's similar to that? She has a good Instagram page as well. She's really good for all things formula related and like just the different types and which one do I choose? You know, do I need the store brand? I don't want to say any brands because I'm not technically allowed to, but like, do I need the store brand, this fancy brand that I get from a subscription, or can I get the Costco one? Like where
Right? Yeah.
she has a lot of good information on that to help you pick the right formula for you and your baby.
Awesome. Well, good.
And
Well,
yes, for pumping, I do have one. I will send it to you. It just has some helpful items that I pack in my pumping bag, especially for like returning to work. So
awesome.
different things that I like to have in my bag. So I can definitely send that to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I do have one last question before we go to
Yeah.
the last one, just because I think this is probably weighing on someone's mind.
Yeah.
They're like, wow, she has so much great information, but can a virtual consult be good enough? Like I think that sometimes that's a
Yeah.
hesitation.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. I mean, I get it all the time. People are like, how do you do lactation virtually? Like, how do you do this? I will say I have helped moms up in Canada and down into the Bahamas. That one was a fun one because it literally takes like 2 weeks for them to like, it has to like clear customs. And like when she orders something from Amazon, it takes like 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm like,
Holy
my
cow.
alone, I can order something, it's here like now
You're
outside
right.
my door. So yes, I think it can be virtual can be a really good option. Like I said, one, if financials are an issue, that it is a cheaper way, that a more affordable a way, but you can still get valuable information. And I can still I feel like I became a lactation consultant it was like the start of COVID, and I started doing virtual during that time too. And I really think it made me a better lactation consultant because I've had to pick up on more subtle things because I'm not physically with you. So it even puts my detective work that I talked about like on a higher end. I really like virtuals because yes, you can still learn a lot. And especially if you're in a geographic location that just does not, like if you are in a very rural area that doesn't have access to a lactation consultant, virtual is better than nothing. Like we can 100% help.
Sure.
Um, I mean, we literally have our baby dolls and we're doing it with
Yeah.
you. And then to that point too, it can be a more affordable. I know that, self-pay prices can be high and can be tricky to navigate if insurance is not covering. So a virtual consult can definitely be that like kind of middle of like, okay, do I need to book a full-on consult with you? Like you
Mhm.
think it would be beneficial? I do so much over virtual that I feel like any information is better than none, and like any amount of help can be better. So like I mean I've worked with moms that are in other states that have worked with lactation consultants in person that just didn't give them their answer, and that goes back to what you were saying about getting a second opinion. Like it is never wrong to go get a second opinion. Like you
Yeah.
have that right to advocate for yourself, advocate for your baby. And if you're not getting the answers, find someone that will give you the answers.
Yeah, no, thank you, Courtney. That's such great wisdom and guidance. And, like, again, there's so much information out there and everyone has different specialties. And
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
figuring out someone who's going to gel with you. And so
Absolutely.
that's why I'm so glad to have you here and talking about all these things because sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And
It's so
it's a great way to get to know some of the providers that are out
fun.
there and see what
Hmm.
options we have available to us. And
Absolutely.
hopefully this helps parents who are listening kind of notice like, oh, I should maybe ask some of these kinds of questions when you're
Hmm.
interviewing and meeting somebody. So
Hmm.
then this way you can get a better feel for who you're going to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'll be the first one. Like, if I can't answer I'm like, let me get you to someone. I don't have a nutrition background. So there's sometimes, especially if I have a mom dealing with allergies, that I'm like, I want you to see someone that is a registered dietitian so that they can help you with your nutrition because I know a lot, but that's not my area. Like,
Right.
let me get you to someone else that can. So yeah, there's so many providers out there, which can be hard, but finding the one that works for you and works for your picture can be very important.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do the top 5 loving lessons learned.
Yeah.
I like to hear what people have to say. What's your favorite parenting product or service?
Can I choose my own? Can I
You
choose a
can.
lactation consultant? I would say, I mean, if you are
Did
breastfeeding,
you work with a lactation consultant? I'm just kind of curious.
not prenatally.
Okay.
Not with, well, so not prenatally with my first. During with my first, I did. With my second, I was an IBCLC and I literally had to go. I have a big group on Instagram. We're all lactation consultants. It's a group message. And I went on there and I was like, I'm having I'm in my mom brain. And they were like, we think you need to work with a lactation consultant. And I'm like, you're right. And so
You're like, of course.
I did actually do a virtual consult with a lactation consultant that's very close to me now. We're very good friends, but she's out in Arizona and she was like, she texted me and she was like, let's hop on a virtual. Let me just kind of talk you through. And it was just that I couldn't take the mom hat off. Like I am a lactation consultant, but I wasn't in my lactation consultant. I didn't have that hat on. And
Totally get
so
that.
during my second, I did work with a lactation consultant because I was like, I can't, what is going on?
You're like, I need
Um,
help. Yes.
Even lactation consultants need lactation consultants. So yeah, my biggest product I would say is if you are planning to breastfeed a lactation, a prenatal is like the best way because one, you can see, I mean, just like a doula, you can see how you vibe with them and their personality and is it are your feeding goals, is it going to mesh well with what, obviously any lactation consultant, your feeding goals should be your feeding goals, but we can have some things there that you want to make sure that it meshes and that they're going to be
Yeah.
able to honor your feeding goals. So I would highly recommend that for, I mean, just doing some sort of prenatal consult. If you are formula feeding, I still think that like a class or some sort of like feeding class can be very beneficial just because there's so much like formula. It's like, oh yeah, you just put it in the bottle, but there's like so much more than that.
Oh
So
my gosh. Yes.
I am all for like any kind of prenatal education because you just get it when you can absorb it the most and not when you're sleep deprived because that's not when you want to be learning something.
Highly recommend all
Yeah.
of that. Yes. What is your best self-care tip
I, for my moms or for myself?
for you?
For
Mm,
me,
for you.
I have to work out. My biggest thing, I do group exercise and it is just my like if I'm stressed out, exercise, moving my body is like, I mean, even if it's just like getting outside and going on a walk, like moving my body is the biggest thing. And so I would say exercise or moving my body for sure.
Awesome. And what is something you never thought you would do or say?
Mm. Oh, that's a tricky one. Um, this is related to sleep. I said that I would never like bed share or co-sleep with my baby, and it did happen. We did it safely and we followed what we needed to follow, but that got us more sleep and a very big part of our journey. So I said I would never do it, and then I did it because I found myself in a very unsafe sleep position. I was falling asleep in the recliner and I looked and I was like, this is not safe. So I need to find something that is more safe.
Yeah.
So
No, it's so funny that when people come to me, it's like sleep confessions. Like they're
it
like,
is.
I did this. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm like, I said I would never co-sleep. And I was the most reactive co-sleeper ever. I was like, hop on in. Like, let's do this. I was like, that's what got us the most sleep. But
It's
I think it's such a personal journey. And there are ways that we can safely co-sleep. So I do share that. And I
yeah.
have a blog post that, I talk about that.
That
And
is
it's like
so
there's so many choices, so
yeah.
many options, and culturally too, sometimes it's important to take that into
Mhm.
consideration. So I think what you said was safe. We want to make
Yes.
sure that we're
Yeah.
creating
I
safe
think that's a
spaces.
I think that's a big thing that it's not taught how to do it safely. And so I find
Mhm.
people like propping themselves up with pillows and like in the recliner. And I'm like, that's the worst thing we could probably do.
Right. Yeah.
Like if we can do it in a safer way. And that's I really had to. I was like, I am not sleeping. This is dangerous. And for me and my baby's safety, I have to make this decision I just have to bring you in bed. And so we just did it very safely. And I followed the Safe Sleep 7 and that's my confession because before I had my second, I said I would never do this. And
totally okay. If it works and everyone's sleeping, I say more power to you.
here we are.
And I'm going to include the link to the blog post about
Yeah.
safe co-sleeping. It's with James McKenna, where he talks about the research behind it. And so I
Yep.
think it's just important to know that there are options.
That's the
And
biggest
so
thing.
anyone that's here, your choices around feeding, your choices around sleeping are all welcome. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
important to know.
Yep.
And the last one, what's one thing you've learned in your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, like about the business
About
or
yourself, about the business, anything in this journey? Like, I'm thinking about a lot of mamas out there tend to want to create a business. And so
Mhm.
sometimes things for them to think about, and a lot of our professionals, they're all business owners too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
just,
I think the biggest thing is, I mean, working for yourself has its pros and cons. You're never truly off work, but you
mhm,
also set your own schedule. So I mean, we went on vacation last summer, and my husband and we're both like, we have two business, like I have this business and then I have another business. And so we were having to work, like it didn't stop. We can't really like take a vacation, like fully unplugged because we have these, but then we also have the flexibility, like to do things with our kids and like have the off time when we want to and be present. And so I think there's nothing wrong with working in a corporate world or working an entrepreneur by yourself. There's no right or wrong at whatever fits for your family. But I think that's the biggest thing that I learned is that yes, I'm working a lot, but I'm also doing what I love. So it doesn't feel like work. And there are some
agree.
times that I can take in the middle of the day and be like, I'm going to go hang out with my kid because that's what I can do because of my job. So,
Yeah.
there's pros and cons to all of it. You're never truly off, but when you're doing something you love so much, then it makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your passion here with us.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm so grateful for you and the wisdom and the work that you're doing in your corner of the world.
Thank you
So
so much.
thanks, Courtney. And we'll continue the conversation another time.
I love it. I look forward to it.
Thanks for tuning into today's show. You can see all of the details and show notes below. And as you go out into your day, I hope that you'll make it your mission to be calm, confident, and rested as you lead today. Sweet dreams.